Okay, I think we should get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Elisa. I'm the product manager for the Twilio Proxy API. And today with me, I will have Sam and Akhil from Grubhub. And I invited them to my talk because I thought that for me, the most credible way to tell you all the hows and the whys of Proxy was actually to invite them to share their first-hand experience with the product. But before I hand over to them, I wanted to give you a quick summary on why we launched Proxy and what happened since we launched it. So I wanted to start by asking you, how much of mobile users' time do you think is spent using apps? I was quite surprised by this stat. It's 92%. According to TechCrunch, 92% of mobile users' time is spent during using apps, which includes business apps, right? Companies that provide their customers with their app in order to communicate with them. And this proliferation of apps is a big opportunity for companies and businesses to capture contextual information about their customers. But on the other side is also raising the bar of the customer expectation, because now a customer is communicating with the business through the app all the time, and then when they pick up the phone and they call or they text, they expect to be treated as a known person because they think that the business have been knowing them through the app, right? So this is, for example, is an example of contextual mobile app experience that I think is done well. That I think is like, this company is really using contextual experience to serve their customers well. I love shopping on Amazon Prime, and every time I have a problem and I click the Contact Us button, magically the contact center agent not only knows about me, but many times they even anticipate my question. And this scenario works well in a contact center environment because any agent, provided with the right information about me, can solve my problem. On the other side, there are other examples of contextual experiences that are really done poorly. So let's assume you are trying to locate your taxi, not your Uber, your taxi. I know it's very rare right now, but let's make this example. And you don't know where your taxi is. And in the traditional example, in the traditional scenario of a few years ago, you would have the contact center dispatcher between you as a customer and the driver. And even in the best case where this contact center was really contextual, the taxi company would have an app through which you could call the contact center. Whenever you don't find your taxi driver, you click, you call the contact center guys has all your contextual information, they know who you are, they know which cab number you were waiting for, they know your address, but this experience is broken. It's broken because they will have to hang up, call the driver is lost, then they need to hang up again, call you back, ask where you live, and be the intermediate point between these two parties. So this experience is broken because in this case, you just want to talk to the driver directly. Introducing the dispatcher between these two people introduced delay and loss in translation. And the reason why contact centers cannot connect you directly with the driver is that contact centers were designed to route a call, or in best cases an SMS, to any agent. They weren't designed to look up which driver or which specific employee should help you out at that moment. The good news is that a lot of our Twilio customers solved these problems for a few years. They have been solving this problem for a few years. And this is one of my favorite examples. I love Instacart. I love shopping with Instacart. As a matter of fact, I think I haven't been in a grocery store for years. And whenever I submit an order, I love chatting with my shopper because I'm a really picky customer. I like to pick up my ingredients, and the communication channel is direct. I can send him direct text messages. If there is a replacement, the guy can send me back an MMS. It's really fast. It's contextual because the guy knows all my preferences, and as soon as my shopping experience is done, we are disconnected. Instacart solved this problem by provisioning Twilio phone numbers whenever between me as a customer and whoever as shoppers would pick up my order request, not any agent. That specific shopper that picked up my order, right? And then Instacart would also protect my privacy by hiding my personal number and putting in the middle this Twilio phone number. And by doing that, basically Instacart, by embedding Communications API into the app, basically what Instacart did, they started contextually orchestrating the channel creation and deletion between me, as a customer, and the shopper. And by doing that, they basically created a communication experience which is highly responsive, is contextual, and it's secure. The bad news is that building this sort of experiences is extremely difficult. It sounds really easy. You provision a Twilio bridge number and then you're done, but that is not really the truth. We have interviewed many customers who did that, and as a matter of fact, all of them told us that it takes like several months to a few engineers to build all this logic that I was describing, that contextually builds those channels and destroys them. And I won't go into the details about that because this is exactly the reason why I invited Akhil and Sam to talk about that. So we launched Proxy for basically alleviate this type of problem. Proxy is a declarative API for powering private text and voice conversations between customers and a mobile worker representing a business. And we launched Proxy in public beta last December of 2017, and it was super exciting to be a product manager of this product. The reason is that it's so easy to deploy Proxy that I saw customers going from zero traffic to like thousands of sessions, like in a matter of few days. And I was already expecting like ride-sharing type of apps, like shopping type of, like food delivery type of apps. But then I discovered that this one-to-one type of communication is a real problem for so many different type of companies. Not only riders and drivers or shoppers and customers, but even doctor and patients, or tutor and students, financial advisor and investor, real estate agent and customers. There are so many different verticals that I couldn't even imagine. And their business scenario are quite different, but the problem is the same. And also the commonalities that they have between them are all the benefit that they got from Proxy. So to summarize, they were like much faster time to deploy, days instead of months. And again, they will give you more details. Cost savings, again, I haven't given you much detail about why, but with your normal implementation, it would take you like thousands of phone numbers to enable this bridge number between two parties. With Proxy, you can reuse the same like few numbers for like thousands of same pairings communicating at the same time. So huge cost savings. And it's like you will deploy so fast, it's kind of like an out-of-the-box experience, but at the same time, the full Twilio style is completely customizable. And every business have fine-tuned their implementation to really fulfill their end-to-end user experience. And I look forward for Sam and Akhil to share what they did with Proxy.
Yeah, no worries. I can keep talking, and as long as you like, it's not a problem. Yeah. You know, as long as we keep going. Good. Okay. So my name's Sam. Like Lisa said, I'm from Grubhub. And before I get started into about Grubhub's experience with masking communication and why it's important for our space, as well as how we looked and evaluated Twilio Proxy and what we learned from running Twilio Proxy in production nationwide for a few months, I'd like to start with a little bit of audience participation, just to see who's familiar with our product. So by an order of hands, how many people have ordered delivery or takeout in the past few weeks or so? Oh, good. Lazy people like myself. Love it. All right. How many of you ordered online? Also very good. How many people used Grubhub? All right, less good, but hopefully we can correct that. And so let's talk about Grubhub, right? Grubhub is the leading online food ordering platform in the United States. We serve basically over 400,000 orders a day. We've got over 80,000 restaurants on the platform nationwide. We've got over 15 million diners, which are our hungry customers at Grubhub. Basically, we started chugging along on this food ordering online platform space in 2004. We merged with Seamless in 2013 and went public in 2014. And so while you might not have ordered on Grubhub and or Seamless recently, we do have many other brands that are actually part of the company now, Level Up being the most recent acquisition, if you get those Google alerts. And we've got all menus, menu pages, like I said, Grubhub and Seamless. We also acquired Eat24 from Yelp and have a partnership with Yelp. We also have partnerships with Groupon, Taco Bell, KFC, and a bunch of other national and regional chains across the nation. And so let's talk about Grubhub and what makes Grubhub work, right? How does the Grubhub platform work? Well, basically the Grubhub operates in what we call like the three pillars of the business, right? We've got our diners, which are our hungry customers. We've got our restaurants, the good-willed people making our delicious food. And we've got what we call our delivery partners, which are responsible for connecting the two pieces, right? They basically pick up the orders from the restaurants and deliver them to the diners. And so what's interesting about this is that it creates this kind of feedback loop, right, that synergizes really well. And that's why we've got it depicted here in a nice circle, right? If we have diners providing more orders to restaurants, right, that allows restaurants, one, to make more money, but it continues the flow, right? More orders to our restaurants provide more delivery opportunities to our delivery partners, allowing our delivery drivers to make more money, right? And the concept of restaurants making more money and delivery partners being happier and providing better service, right, allows us to actually bring more restaurants onto the platform. And what does having more restaurants on the platform actually mean? It means that we have an increased variety in the cuisines and selection that are offered to our diners, which actually attract more diners to the platform, right? And so you can see how this kind of feeds on itself, right? More diners equals more orders for restaurants equal more delivery drivers, and more orders and more delivery drivers equal more restaurants on the platform, which in turn make more diners, right? We have this nice kind of cycle going on. And so let's talk about why communications matter in this cycle, right? And later on in the talk, I'll focus specifically between our drivers and our diners. But as a whole, basically anywhere we can optimize on this cycle allows us to provide a better experience for all three pillars. And so I've got some numbers up here on the board, up here on the screens, that show kind of some critical numbers for our business, right? Or for food in general. Right, the first one is for our business, right? We want the approximate time from a diner clicking checkout on our page or our app to when they actually eat. And similarly, as many of us, especially myself, that do enjoy cold pizza, pizza actually starts to get cold at about around 20 minutes. And of course, burgers have an even less hot time, as it were. And so you can see how timing here is very important to the diner experience, right? If there's any sort of delay in communication or delivery of this food, it starts to deteriorate the diner experience. The food quality that the restaurant provides starts to go down. And what that means is anything that Grubhub can do to try and optimize and make this process more efficient for both diner, driver, and restaurants allows us to, hopefully not force you to eat cold pizza just because you wanted hot pizza. And so, like I said, let's focus on this diner and driver experience, right? The main use case here, and it's one that I run into quite frequently when I order Grubhub, which I do, by the way, all the time, is this kind of communication between a delivery driver and myself. The most common one, we work on the 15th floor right next to Bryant Park in New York City. The most common one is, I can't find parking. Can you please come down? I forgot my ID. And what floor are you on? Right? Those three kinds of questions happen in major urban areas basically all the time. And so you start to think, okay, so I have to, as a company, as Grubhub, have to be able to make sure that this communication is as efficient as possible, right? And historically, and I'll go into this in a second, Grubhub leverages a customer care organization to mitigate or communicate between two parties, right? And that's very slow, right? If there's any sort of delay between me as a diner and a delivery driver, means it could cost, even if it costs 2 minutes, the quality of my food and the quality of my experience goes down, especially when I'm very hungry, right? Any sort of delay to my food makes me very unhappy. And so let's talk about the solutions that Grubhub tried to take to provide simple, safe, and efficient communication between our delivery drivers and our diners. And so the first one, and this one is what was used many years ago, is basically sharing numbers, right? Back in the wild west of technology where privacy wasn't a thing, you basically just gave out all of your diners' information to restaurants and vice versa to facilitate this fast communication, right? And of course, that provides a nice context, right? Whenever I as a diner talk to a delivery driver, I'm talking to specifically the person with my food. He can tell me exactly where he is, and the communication is nice and fast and contextual. Of course, there is a problem here, right? I, as a diner, every time I order food, give out my phone number to a random stranger in order to deliver my food. Similarly, I, as a delivery partner at Grubhub, every time I deliver an order, am giving out my number to a random stranger. And so this is not a real solution, right? Because it's not secure. If Grubhub is targeting those three tenets of simple, safe, and efficient communication, it doesn't meet the secure one at all. And there's no control from Grubhub's side on the customer experience, right? We have no insight into that communication whatsoever. And so let's talk about what Grubhub has used more recently, but still historically, around this kind of communication. And it alludes to what Elisa had said earlier, right? We basically leveraged our customer care organization to handle all communication, to arbitrate any issues, all of that kind of. And what this means is it is secure. We have our PII covered. I don't get a driver's phone number, the driver doesn't get my phone number, and all of that's good. Unfortunately, it's very slow, right? We have that kind of dispatcher model where you call, I have to, as a customer care agent, have to call the driver to figure out where he is and then call you back to get any sort of information. And again, that's just, it's working down time on how good my diner experience is gonna be. And so that's why Grubhub started to look and try to innovate in this space, right? How do we provide this simple, safe, and efficient communication because the current solution that we had with customer care, while it was secure, it was not efficient, and it was not necessarily simple, right? We're paying people to essentially arbitrate these issues. And so we did what most companies had done before Twilio Proxy, and that's build our own proxy solution. And I can safely say, being the person that was responsible for most of the investigation at the front, every voice and SMS provider that sells phone numbers, Twilio included, had a page up on their documentation that says, this is how you do proxy communication. You get 2 proxy phone numbers, you associate them. Every time a call comes in, you just respond, hey, connected to this other phone number, boom, you've got proxy communication. And that sounds very simple. And it is not that simple, right? The actual ability to proxy the communication is very simple, but maintaining that solution, both at scale in multiple regions and having insight into the process, right? And controlling how long these conversations can last, right? Associating that information, handling multiple threads from multiple diners to multiple drivers, right? It just gets to start to get more and more complicated. How do I get insight into the process? Well, there's more complication, right? What do I do when I fail? More complication. And so what I've provided here on the right for you is basically the very first attempt at what I thought the solution would be, or what the team thought the solution would be. And you can see there's already 10 components up on the board, already not trivial, already not simple. And by the end, it was basically double that. And so while this solution did meet our simple, safe, and efficient communication for our diners and our drivers, we realized that simple didn't just mean for the diners and the drivers, right? It had to be simple for us as a business. It had to be simple for us to maintain. It had to be efficient as a business. It had to be efficient for us to maintain. And building your own solution is anything but that. So let's talk about how Proxy works, right? The next evolution of Grubhub's mass communication platform is Twilio Proxy. So let's start to dive into how that actually works. Okay, and at a very high level, basically the way that Twilio Proxy works is you call the API and you say, hey, I'd like to create a session between two participants. In Grubhub's case, it is our diners and our drivers. And once Twilio comes back and says like, all right, I've proxied them together, here are their numbers. Anytime one of the two participants calls their associated proxy number, Twilio, on our behalf, basically forwards the calls in SMS. It does that very easy thing for us already. The thing that Twilio does very, very well is manage this conversation for us completely, right? Once we have this session established between two parties, it manages the entire conversation. All of the SMSs between the two parties, all of the voice interactions between the two parties, how long that conversation should last, right? Akhil will go into detail, but at Grubhub, we allow 60 minutes, right? That's how long we think the experience should be between a driver and a diner. And Twilio Proxy basically organizes all of these concepts into four simple things, and I have them in a hierarchical view for you here. Right, services at the very top, these are your number pools. Right, these are all of your Twilio phone numbers logically grouped together. This is where your capacity planning goes. How many numbers should I have? From which country codes, from which area codes do I want to put numbers into to service our mass communication? Twilio Proxy breaks it down and then into sessions. And like I said, these are the conversations, right? These are the message threadings. Basically, a single service can have thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions. From there, going downwards again, we have our participants. These are our hungry diners and our eager delivery partners to mass communication between, right? Every session basically has two participants in it. And lastly, at the bottom, we have interactions. And this represents the single SMS or the single voice call between the two parties, right? And it's important to know that the problem, or the Twilio Proxy problem, could have stopped at participants. It could have said like, hey, we'll mask all of your communication and that's it. But the fact is that Twilio Proxy actually gives you insight into the actual interactions, when they happened, what's in them, so that you as a business can then take leverage of them, right? You can utilize that data. And so what I'd like to show you is just some brief slides about, these are screens from the actual Twilio Proxy console. And you can see here we've actually got 3 services set up, and these are our different number pools. There's one actually made for this demo, as well as 2 other test ones. And from here, you can actually dive in to both sides of the service, right? You can either dive in to see what phone numbers you have allocated to it, or into all of the sessions that are currently running or have run for the service. So let's dive into the sessions. And you can see here there are actually 2 sessions. One between Akhil and myself, which we have never talked because we just talk in person, since we sit right next to each other at work. And there's one actually between myself and Elisa. Right, and you can actually see here, Twilio Proxy actually gives you information about exactly when the first interaction started or when the session started. That's the date started there, and when the last piece of communication was. And not only that, but Twilio Proxy, like I said, gives you insight into that individual interaction level. We can see that here. Right, here are 4 instances of communication, exactly when they happened, the content that was in them. Right? And from here, you can do any sort of learning on the responses. You can start to imagine ways to optimize the experience for both the delivery driver and the partner. Say we know in major metro areas that all of the delivery partners, or a vast majority of them, always text, what floor are you on? Right? In my case, that's every single time. And so let's optimize the delivery driver experience and put a button in the app that automatically starts the text message with, what floor are you on? Just to make it faster, just to make this communication as efficient and simple as possible, right? Again, coming back to those 3 tenets. you can really start to see how companies can start to leverage this. And so what I'd like to do now is basically turn it over to Akhil, and he'll walk you through the proxy implementation and what we've learned and leveraged at Grubhub.
Thank you, Sam. Can you hear me? My name is Akhil, and I work on the cloud and infrastructure team at Grubhub, along with Sam. Today, I'm going to go over our Twilio proxy implementation, some use cases, and code examples of how we use Twilio proxy at Grubhub. So one of the main use cases, as Sam already mentioned, is anonymizing communications between the driver and the diner. So this is how our driver app looks. So this is a very typical use case where a diner has ordered delivery, and during the checkout process, he has entered some special instructions, instructing the driver to call him rather than ringing his doorbell or knocking. So by the time the driver has the food and is outside the diner's apartment, he simply goes to the driver app and clicks the call icon. On the second screenshot, you can see that we give a nice dialog box saying that you are going to be using masked numbers and your original phone number is going to be protected. So finally, when the driver clicks the call button, the app simply connects to the iOS or Android native dialer and makes a call to the anonymous number, which is provided by Twilio. This call goes to Twilio. Twilio successfully routes this call to the diner, and the diner simply sees an anonymous caller ID on his phone. As you can see, this is a simple, safe, and efficient means of communication. So this is how the different API calls work and how the driver app, the server, and Twilio proxy interact with each other. So by the time the food is ready to be delivered and dispatched to the driver app simply makes a call to the Grubhub server requesting for proxy number. So the Grubhub server again takes the driver's number and the diner's number and makes a call to Twilio proxy. Twilio proxy at their backend create a session and give out two numbers, one for the driver and one for the diner. These are the proxy numbers. And finally, the Grubhub server returns these numbers back to the driver app. This way, the driver app already has the proxy number when the driver begins his delivery. So creating a session and obtaining a proxy number from Twilio is really simple. It is a two-step process. Step one is to create a session. So this takes two pieces of information. The first one is the mode. Here we say that it should support voice and SMS. So this way, both the diners and the drivers can use voice and SMS to communicate with each other, and Twilio proxy would successfully forward this communication. The second piece of information is the time to live. This is how long the session is going to last. So in our case, a delivery order approximately takes around 60 minutes. So we set the time to live to 60 minutes. And finally, we use the session creator interface and create a session. The next step is to add the two participants to the session. In our case, it's the driver and the diner. We simply need the session ID, which was obtained from step one, and the two phone numbers. We make an API call to Twilio proxy, and proxy returns back a mask number, which is going to be used later. As you can see, this is simply 9 lines of code. It's very easy to build and really easy to maintain as well. So this is again the driver calling the diner. The driver calls a proxy number. The call goes to Twilio. Twilio looks up the number of the diner, makes a swap of this number, and calls the diner. As you can see, the driver has called one number, and you can see the caller ID on the diner's phone to be different, as these two use different mask numbers. So how does Twilio proxy allocate these proxy numbers on their end, in their backend? Twilio proxy simply uses a combination of one of the participant and the proxy number. In our case, it's the driver's number and the proxy number to look up the diner's number. This way, the same proxy number can be used for multiple participants. For example, let's say Tom is our delivery driver and he is delivering to 2 diners. So in this case, there will be 2 numbers which will be allocated by Twilio Proxy. However, Twilio Proxy can reuse these phone numbers for another driver who is delivering to 2 different diners. That way, we can have like thousands of drivers delivering to different diners, and only 2 numbers would be needed in our number pool. So that way, we can have like thousands of concurrent sessions per phone number, and this results in enormous cost savings. So at Grubhub, we have customized our Twilio Proxy experience by leveraging several features. This is how the Twilio Proxy console looks like, and this is where you can set certain features and toggles and enable features. I will go through the features which we leveraged in the upcoming slides. So the first 2 features are time to live and out of session callbacks. Time to live is how long the session is going to last. In our case, it's 60 minutes, so either the diner or the driver can call each other during the 60-minute interval, and Twilio Proxy would successfully forward this communication. So this leads us to the question of what would happen if either of the 2 participants, that is the driver or the diner, calls the proxy number after 60 minutes. So Twilio Proxy provides a feature known as out of session callbacks. So in this case, if Proxy receives a out of session call from either the driver or the diner after 60 minutes, it would simply call an endpoint hosted by Grubhub, and it would be up to Grubhub to handle this out of session call. So in our case, we simply connect this call to our customer care organization to arbitrate any issues. On the left, you can see the flow of how this works. So the driver app calls Proxy. Proxy realizes that it's an out of session call, so it makes a call to the Grubhub server, which in turn connects the driver app to Grubhub's customer care so that they can talk. So the next feature which we leveraged was interaction callbacks. Again, Twilio Proxy allows us to host an endpoint which it would call on each interaction. So when I say interaction, it's either a call or an SMS, which either the driver or the diner makes. So once Twilio Proxy detects that it's getting an incoming call, it would make a call back to an endpoint hosted by Grubhub. At Grubhub, we use this endpoint to tick several metrics. This gives us insight into the number of calls, the number of SMSs, what is the type of communication happening, the frequency of the communication, and we have maintained several graphs and alerts based on these metrics. The next feature which we leveraged was area code matching and country code matching. This simply means that once Grubhub makes a call to Twilio Proxy, Proxy will either match your area code or country code and return back the corresponding proxy numbers. So supporting country code matching was really simple in case of Grubhub, since most of our business is in the United States. So we simply added a few foreign numbers to our number pool or against our service, and Proxy would successfully return that country code. So for example, let's say your driver has a Puerto Rican phone number and our diner has a US phone number. So the Grubhub backend would make a call to Proxy. Proxy would intelligently decide that it should lease out a Puerto Rican number to the driver and a US number to the diner. The second one is the area code matching, which is slightly more tricky to support. This is because there are so many area codes in the US, and we need to buy these phone numbers and add these to the Twilio console. And it's a bit difficult to do capacity planning for, as in how many numbers per area code to buy and that kind of information. However, we got around this by supporting 2 different number pools, or you can say 2 different consoles, 2 different services in the Twilio Proxy console. So initially, we would try to match a phone number against a pool number 1, which corresponds to our major markets. In case such an area code is not found, we would fall back to pool number 2, which simply does a country code matching. So either way, our diners and the drivers would definitely get a proxy number. So we've used Twilio Proxy in production for over 6 months now. It was really easy to implement, and it took us 2 weeks to deploy. But over this period of time, we have learned a few lessons as well. So the first one is to monitor everything for outage and utilization. We tick several metrics and have dashboards and alerts against them. Some of the key metrics that we tick are the Twilio Proxy API success and failure rates. Then another one are the interaction callbacks, the metrics associated with the interaction callbacks. This allows us to see the number of calls, number of SMSs flowing through Twilio Proxy, what our peak hours are, and that kind of information. The next one is the number of sessions and the number pool saturation. By this, I mean Twilio Proxy hosts an endpoint which we can call, and this returns the number of sessions currently in progress and the number of phone numbers which are currently being used. So based on this information, we know how saturated the number pool is, and we can decide whether we need to buy new phone numbers and add to the pools. What is the number of sessions during our peak hours and when the call volume is huge. The next one is planning for failure. We have a solid fallback plan in case proxied communication is unsuccessful for any reason. We simply fall back on our customer care organization, and which helps us to put our best foot forward to arbitrate any issues associated with any orders. The next one is being upfront with our users. As you can see from the screenshot on the left, we have a dialog box saying that this is from our driver app. There is a dialog box saying that you're going to be using masked numbers and your privacy is being protected. So that way, the users of our app already know that their privacy is protected, and this helps to build trust with the app and with Grubhub as a company. So Twilio Proxy has worked really great for us. It provides a really easy way to protect the diners and drivers' privacy, and it is extremely cost effective. And as you see, it was really easy to build and maintain, so it keeps our developers happy as well. Back to you, Alisa.
Thank you so much, Akhil and Sam. It was very exciting to see how their traffic grew so fast. As he said, in 2 weeks, they deployed in the whole US. So it was quite an experience. And so since we have a few minutes left, if you have any questions that you want to ask either to me or to them, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Come over.
So I can answer that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, okay, cool, thanks. I can answer that one. So originally we just let the sessions fall off because that was the easiest thing to do, and it's within our expected guideline of how long a delivery order should take for our delivery partners. But we realized that we can actually close them sooner, right? One, it frees up those numbers back into the pool to help us with utilization. Two, it just didn't seem necessary to keep that level of communication open if the delivery happens faster than normal, right? And part of the process internally at Grubhub is that delivery drivers are responsible for marking when food was actually delivered, and part of that process comes with closing the session, right?
So would you potentially leave that open for an extra 15 minutes for conversation?
Microphone.
Would you potentially leave that open, I guess, for feedback? Say they wanted to text the delivery driver right after maybe they forgot something. Oh, my fries were in the car, and the delivery driver forgot. Do you leave it open? I'm just wondering if you have any tactics for handling sessions outside of TTL.
Sure, I'm glad you asked. So we took the heuristic-based way first, which is also the lazy way based first. or the easy way first, which is essentially our numbers earlier said like we expect all deliveries to happen hopefully at approximately 45 minutes, which is why the session lasts for 60, right? We basically gave it a 15-minute buffer by default. Similarly, we think all issues after that happy experience, that happy path experience, actually benefits us by going through the inefficient route of going through customer care. Because one, if it's a really bad issue, we want to put our best foot forward and say like, hey, let's give you a concession or anything like that. Let's give you that proper like, you know, we care about you as an individual because we do kind of experience instead of just bumping the time. We do have tools to bump the time when necessary. But normally we only leverage those for very large orders or for catering orders, parts where the delivery experience could possibly take longer, right? Because they're set up or anything like that. Awesome.
Is it okay if I ask one more? Okay.
Maybe I can add one more thing on what he said. So in Proxy, you also have another feature where even if your session is closed, and let's say your customer tried to call the number, but the session is closed, it hits the out of session webhook, as they explained. But you also have the option, which we just released it recently. I have to write a blog post because nobody really knows about that. That you can reply with the JSON file to the webhook, because the webhook is telling you, hey, customer X is trying to call his old proxy number, but the session is closed. So you have a way to reply to the webhook, say, hey, reopen the session, and forward the call. So in that, it's a little bit more dynamic way to handle the situation.
Awesome, thank you. One more question, I guess. Do you have anything to note about the sticky session handling where it reconnects the user back with the same number that they had before? Do you have anything to note about that in your guys' testing for monitoring?
So let me see if I understand you correctly before I spat out something. Yeah. So you're wondering if we took any protections against leasing the same proxy number between two?
There's a sticky session option, right?
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you have any notes about that, what you found when you were testing it, or maybe monitoring a few things.
So for most of our use cases, like drivers take shifts, and we have so many of them that sticky sessions weren't really that necessary because, well, at least we saw the merit of sticky sessions being for longer living sessions that represent like a customer care agent that you have a back and forth with, like a tax consultant, right? Like using the example that Elisa said earlier, or like a financial advisor. Like keeping a sticky session where the number is the same when you try to ask for it makes a lot of sense there. But for ours, since the churn is so short and so small that we didn't see any leverage in providing sticky sessions, it does hold up your pool a little bit more in terms of utilization, and so to not worry about it and to be as utilized as possible with all of the numbers that we have, we chose not to leverage it. Does that make sense? Cool.
We have one question back there. Yeah.
Hey, I was curious about if like unknown phone numbers end up calling one of your reserved phone numbers.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean,
all the time.
Right, exactly. So is that the same as an out of call session callback, or is that handled differently?
Oh, so that's an interesting question. You want to take this one?
Yeah. Okay. So such calls would be treated as out of session, and it would call our out of session endpoints, and ideally it would go to the customer care organization.
Okay, so it's the same as like an out of session callback.
Sure.
Great.
Sure. I do believe that Twilio Proxy does offer the ability to tell you whether or not a call ever had a proxy session, which is helpful in those like completely random or maybe even robocall or whatever.
Yeah, we've gotten some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah. So have we, and from there, like we've taken some steps to try and mitigate those, to not forward them to care, because we don't think that they could have ever been part of the Grubhub experience. But again, it's possible that a driver is calling the phone number from a different phone because their first phone died, because it's the same one running the driver app or whatever have you. Like, there are use cases where it makes sense to forward, and there are use cases that are done. It is one of the metrics, one of the many metrics that are exposed to us from the Twilio Proxy API, and one of the things we monitor against.
Awesome, thanks. Great. Looking forward to using this.
I think we have a question.
One here.
Oh, can't hear you.
How are you actually measuring saturation if a small pool of numbers can be used for a lot of sessions? Is it ultimately calls or messages per second, or something else?
So that's an interesting question. I'll take that one. So in terms of saturation, it's all about number of concurrent sessions multiplied by the rate of interactions, I guess is the best way to put that. Obviously, two numbers can handle basically any amount of unique pairings. But Grubhub, like most other driver-based solutions, can actually have more than one order in the car at a time, right? If we're doing some sort of optimization or route planning or trip planning, as we call it. And so two numbers aren't actually enough. It's not like our pool at Grubhub is not two numbers, because a single driver is responsible for multiple orders, and as such, multiple diners can be assigned to one driver or vice versa, depending on how often you place orders. Some people place multiple orders back to back because they forgot something in the first order. And so what utilization comes down to, or at least the way we do it at Grubhub, is number of concurrent sessions that we have against a single order versus the number of SMSs that go out against any long code, right? Because we know for a fact that all long codes, at least from Twilio, right, have a rate of 100 per minute or 100 per second or whatever it is, right, before they start to queue them. And so we really try to gauge against that because, again, we don't want that communication being stale for a minute, right? That's a minute of not eating pizza and a minute of a hungry customer. And so that's more or less what we look around. Of course, we do the right thing and plan for failure and have more in the pool than we think our peak traffic should be, so that we can absorb the load should we see spikes and all of that stuff. So we are over provisioned for most of the time. But again, Twilio Proxy. Well, first, phone numbers are relatively cheap, since the pool is only in the tens, right, or in the hundreds, is much better than in the case of buying or being provisioned for 400,000 orders a day. We're many magnitudes lower than that, and so that's what utilization, or at least the story of utilization, looks like at Grubhub. Make sense? Cool. Yeah, sure.
Hi. Is it possible to use the same proxy number for both sides of the conversation? Just curious. That's our homegrown solution. I was just curious why all the demos kind of had two proxies.
I can
So,
take it.
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So logically, the two proxy numbers are two different numbers, but the number allocation algorithm can actually pick the same number. As the only rule is the pairing between the private number and the proxy number is a unique combination. So it can be two different numbers, or it could be the same number. Any other questions? No more time? One. Okay, the last one.
Last one. Sorry, Mark.
We cannot hear you. I'm so sorry.
Fawn thought it was over. He took the mic away.
Sorry.
Sorry, Fawn. Sorry.
So our use case is for an FI where we are sending alerts out to our members. So I had asked this question earlier to our account manager, and we want to send out conversational alerts, like say if there was a transaction on your credit card, and you send out an alert saying whether you want to approve that transaction or decline. In that case, we want to track the response from our end users, our members. And I was wanting like a conversational ID or a session established between that alert, because there might be scenarios where we send out a different alert where we don't care what they respond, and we don't want a session established. So can this be used for that? Like we wouldn't need any proxy numbers or anything like that. We have shortcodes.
So would you have a session established beforehand or not? I didn't really get the scenario.
So say they go in to a grocery store and they use their card at point of sale. At that point, we would send them a message and ask them whether they want this transaction approved or declined. If they say they want it declined, then it should be conversational, right? Because we need to know that the response that they said yes or no belong to that message that we send them to. So we need to tie those two messages, the request and response, with an ID of some kind.
Well, you could use a mix of plain Twilio and proxy to do that. So you could initiate this conversation through a normal Twilio outbound message saying you approve or decline. I say decline, and if you say decline, then maybe you set up a proxy session and then you start a conversation between the two. If I understand correctly your use case, maybe we can discuss offline, because I'm not sure I really hear super well.
Yeah, I think we can, because I think the present Twilio doesn't support that, what I'm asking for. It doesn't, because it gives a separate SID for the request and response, and then the connection is lost.
Go
Did you
Let's
get
talk in a
Got
second.
it.
Let's talk in a second. We're out of time.
Cool. Thank you so much for all your questions.
Thank you.